Welcome to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, respective radio stations island-wide, Tel TV Plus Channel 15, and online viewers. I'm Rolika Roach, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, November 12, 2025. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, Patrice Gums Jr. to address you. Minister Gums, you have the floor.
Good morning to my colleague ministers, members of the press, and to the viewing and listening public. Allow me firstly to express my hopes that everyone had an enjoyable and happy St. Martin Day yesterday. This year's theme, Sankofa, called us to reflect on the past to inform the future. As our country continues to develop, we must recognize that the past is not a place we must live in, but harness lessons from. In order to do better, act better, and more importantly for us as public officials, govern more efficiently and thus effectively. I call on all St. Martiners to reflect on the part that we can each individually play to ensure a sustainable future for all. I am pleased to announce the scheduled road works on Billy Foley Road, commonly referred to as Pelican Road in Simpson Bay. The works will commence tomorrow, Thursday, November 13th, and are expected to be completed by Friday, December 5th, pending weather conditions. For this period, a partial one-lane road closure will be in effect Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. The project will be executed by Windward Roads Infrastructure. In the governing program's entry for VROMI, private-public partnerships are regarded as vital for the future development of St. Martin. The realization of this rehabilitation is possible thanks to the support of the following businesses and stakeholders: Simpson Bay Resort, Flamingo Hilton, The Atrium, La Vista, Simpson Bay Suites, Baker Suites, Market Garden, SMTA, Hollywood Casino, Splash Jewelry, Aquamania, Tipwee Residences, Dollar Thrifty, Buccaneers Beach Bar, Pelly Deli, and Sunset Spa, who have collectively raised $496,500 to complement government's contribution of $94,000 for this initiative. The Ministry of VROMI is currently finalizing a framework to regulate partnerships going forward. But I wish to acknowledge the commitment of these entities, as well as the Prime Minister and the Minister of TEAT, noting their commitment to corporate social responsibility, especially in light of government's limited financial capacities to carry out critical infrastructural works. I also wish to inform the public that similar initiatives are being negotiated for other infrastructure projects, and of course, this will be shared as they are finalized. The Ministry of VROMI requests the cooperation of all road users and thanks the public for their patience as improvements are made to ensure a safer and more durable road network. The Government of St. Martin invites all residents to attend a public consultation for the St. Martin Wastewater Management Project, SWAMP, on Wednesday, December 10th, 2025, starting at 6 p.m. at Bel Air Community Center. The St. Martin Wastewater Management Project, co-funded by the St. Martin Trust Fund and the Government of St. Martin, to the tune of $25 million, aims to improve the island sewage network and enhance the corporate operation of the ATLH Road Wastewater Treatment Plant. Currently, St. Martin's sewage network covers only a few neighborhoods, and the existing plant operates at approximately 65% of its potential capacity. The project seeks to support protecting public health and safeguard St. Martin's surface water, groundwater, and coastal areas from pollution, helping to preserve the island's natural environment and support a sustainable tourism economy. One of the key components is the expansion of the sewage network in the cul-de-sac area, allowing more households to connect to the public system and reduce reliance on septic tanks. During this public consultation, attendees can expect to learn more about the project's design, timeline, and of course, its benefits. The session will also include a presentation discussion on the environmental and social impact assessment, highlighting potential environmental and community impacts due to the project, along with proposed mitigation measures. Your feedback and input are vital. They will help shape the final project design and guide the future of wastewater management on St. Martin, ensuring a cleaner, healthier, and more sustainable island for all. So once again, Wednesday, December 10th, 6 p.m. at the Bel Air Community Center. VROMI is continuing its work on all housing matters. 2 months ago, the ministry submitted its final comments on the new housing policy, and we'll be holding a final meeting with the consultants next Wednesday. Regular meetings with the Housing Foundation to address inventory, procedures, as well as future projects are ongoing. I wish to also confirm that the government is awaiting the transfer of funds from the Netherlands for the purchase of a parcel of land referred to as Remainder Belvedere Estate. In anticipation of the deposit and considering the timeline, the advice for the purchase of the parcel of land is making its rounds for approval, and I'll provide more information on this at the next press briefing. Finally, VROMI court verdict on Westview. I wish to inform the public that on Monday, November 10th, the Court of First Instance issued 2 favorable judgments for the Ministry of VROMI regarding Westview construction. The first case concerned the construction freeze issued by the Ministry of VROMI earlier this year. The project developer challenged this decision and sought to have it overturned. The second case dealt with a lobverzoek, which is a tool available to the public in which to receive information regarding government decisions. It is important to note that despite both cases being won by the government, one particular element of the case was lost, which was the amount of time that we took to respond to the lobverzoek, to which we have to pay 325 guilders to the claimant. Allow me very briefly to go over some of the decisions from the verdict with the public. And why this is important is because throughout this process, there have been many claims within, both across within the political spectrum as well as the media, regarding the rights of the Ministry of VROMI to execute what they did. So, of course, the first question, was the defendant, that being government, authorized to enforce? The court ruled as follows. It is undisputed that at the time of the contested decision, far-reaching excavation and demolition works were being carried out in execution of the construction project. The court established, based on the available documents, that regardless of whether this claimants actually submitted an application for excavation construction permit to the FEN 2022, no excavation construction permits under the LRO, which is an ordinance regarding the civil works permits, were granted. The claimant's argument that the required permission is implicitly part of the issued building permit cannot be accepted in light of the foregoing. Furthermore, this cannot be inferred from the text of the building permit. On the contrary, the building permit explicitly states that the construction project is also subject to other applicable ordinances, of which, of course, the LRO is one of them. Why is this important? Because since taking office, a number of persons have come to me explaining that because they have a building permit, they automatically have a civil works permit, and that is not indeed the case. The court also addressed the concern, was the enforcement disproportionate? In that, the court ruled, the claimant's argument that the goals have already been achieved with the issued building permit cannot be accepted, as mentioned before. The public interest outweighs the financial interests of the claimants. The court also takes into account that the defendant offered the claimant, defendant being government, in this case the Minister of VROMI, offered the claimants the opportunity to proceed with the mobilization works on the site. The defendant, the government, also offered the claimant an accelerated application and approval prior to and immediately after the building stop, all with the aim of minimizing construction delays. The fact that the claimant chose not to immediately submit the required application must remain at their own expenses and risk. Why is this important? Because what you've seen a lot in the media is this sort of narrative that the Minister of VROMI is against development and is against developers. The reality is we need to look at development not only as buildings. What development is also how it's done and who it serves. And it's also a question of government also making its effort to facilitate all persons within its possibilities. Is there a violation of the principle of equality? The claimant invokes the principle of equality. They point out that no excavation construction permits were granted for other construction projects in St. Martin either. The defendant acts contrary to the prohibition of arbitrariness by now without adequate criteria, making an example of the claimants and imposing a building stop solely for their construction project. The court found that the ground of this appeal failed. The defendant, the government, explained in the statement of defense that it was observed that the process for excavation permits has not gone well in recent years. The defendant wishes to improve this, that is the government, and given the lack of sufficient executive capacity, has chosen to prioritize enforcement on large construction projects. The defendant, that is the government, applied the same approach to the claimant's construction projects. However, the conversations there quickly became legalized, and instead of submitting the necessary applications, the claimants argued that no excavation permit was needed and moved to litigation. Furthermore, the defendant's explanation sufficiently shows that insofar as other construction projects were comparable to those of the claimants, the same approach, i.e. a conversation, a dialogue by the ministry and the minister, was always the norm. The conclusion is therefore that the claimants have not sufficiently demonstrated that they were treated unequally compared to similar cases. In view of the explanation provided by the defendant, there is no basis for concluding that the building stop in question was imposed arbitrarily. Why is this important? Because this was also something that was supported and mentioned in the court verdict as being referenced and supported by members of parliament in the question hour related to this. It's very important as well to not politicize government processes for simple benefits and sound bites. Furthermore, as the circumstances the defendant failed to act adequately for years in the absence of excavation permits provides insufficient grounds for a different judgment. The reason for this is that the principle of equality does not extend so far that the defendant is obliged to keep repeating mistakes once made. The claimant's argument therefore fails. Why is this important? Because, ladies and gentlemen, change is hard. Yes, there's been lots of mistakes made by government, and in particular the Ministry of Rummy, for decades. But just because it's been done in the past, it does not mean it has to continue, and that's a court verdict. As minister, I acknowledge that change is hard. Since taking office, many of you have come to me complaining about erosion, poor road quality, and sewage. Many of these are regulated by civil works permits. We can't want to go to heaven but not die. In short, we cannot want a high quality of life and not make necessary changes to make it happen. With that, I continue to express my support and willingness to help all persons to uphold proper building standards and regulations on St. Martin as we continue to chart a course for sustainable development. I thank you, and I await your questions.
Thank you, Minister Gumbs, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, Dr. Luc Marcelino, to address you. Prime Minister Marcelino, you have the floor.
Thank you. The members of the media, good morning. Representative of the DCOM also from government, thank you once more for your commitment and engagement. And thirdly, of course, the people of St. Martin, good morning. First of all, we had a very successful celebration of St. Martin Day yesterday. Once more, I would like to make use of this opportunity to once more congratulate the people of St. Martin with this very important national day for St. Martin. I think a day like yesterday once more demonstrates our unity in our country, and we need our unity actually to confront the future with its challenges. And yesterday the people of St. Martin showed once more that they are a people of unity, and especially also unity with our northern neighbors on the French side. Once more, people of St. Martin, congratulations, and we're looking forward to live in a peaceful country in unity. Secondly, I have had recently a meeting with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. And we discussed two topics that I think is important for the people of St. Martin to be informed of. First of all, seeing the aftermath of the passage of Hurricane Irma with the destructions especially observed in Jamaica, and seeing that we have a great diaspora of Jamaica here in St. Martin, I requested through that meeting that also was present in a virtual meeting the Prime Minister of Curaçao and the Prime Minister of Aruba. I proposed and requested the Minister of Foreign Affairs for us as a kingdom to do our part in assisting Jamaica, realizing that our people know exactly what it means, what the people of Jamaica are passing through. I have good news that the warship Pelican that is part of the Navy of the Kingdom has arrived on the 4th of November in Jamaica, bringing a lot of goods, especially food and medication, all the preliminary basic needs that humankind needs after the devastation of a hurricane. The warship Pelican arrived on the 4th of November in Jamaica, delivering a lot of goods. And by the way, that's not the only one. After delivering the first batch, Pelican left to Barbados again to refill and go back to assist the people of Jamaica. And I'm very thankful to the whole kingdom for their contribution to Jamaica, especially realizing also that the Jamaicans here at St. Martin is also forming part of our nation, and they are well represented as a diaspora here in St. Martin. Secondly, a second topic that I have discussed with the Minister of Foreign Affairs is the development of the tension in the Caribbean, in which we are part of in the Caribbean. And we agreed upon, and he explained us, and we debated the topic, and we agreed in the kingdom that we will have a very neutral position concerning our stance as a kingdom in the developments that are especially between the United States and Venezuela. We will remain neutral in this, and the reason for that is that we are a peaceful area in the Caribbean, and we would like to remain with that peace in our vicinity. We will not participate actively in no actions from the United States. It's very evident. We have agreed upon that we will have a neutral position and that we will not participate actively in any action from the United States towards Venezuela. That is for now how the discussions went. So I think that is important for us to know that that discussion took place. And of course, the first item being the aid to Jamaica was the second agenda point that we as three prime ministers of Curaçao, Aruba, and St. Martin had with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Van Wil. This one. Thirdly now, I want to elaborate a little on the ongoing seemingly a tension field between government and the fire and ambulance department. I said seemingly because from the side of government, there is no hard feelings, no tension feelings towards the fire and ambulance department. In contrary, this government is realizing that for the past years, there has been a neglect of the personnel of the fire and ambulance department. These hardworking people have been knocking at the door of government for years. And they don't like me to say that, but also Those in Parliament that had 4 years before me to solve that problem were also confronted with the same request that they came back to my government for me to solve with them. And for that, I want to say that we are committed and we are in negotiation, but there are some misunderstanding about moving forward. First of all, I have received a letter from the WICSU, and I reacted on that letter on the 24th. It all comes to the following. The members of the fire department would like to have 3 agreements with government. One is the concept of the function book, that's one, the topic function book. The second one is the placement process, and the third one is the retroactive payment. On these 3 topics, there has been a letter from me directed to the president of the union WICSU, in which I commit in that letter to agree with the topic of, and I will further give more explanation about the function book, but I agreed with the function book, I agreed with the placement process, and I agreed with the process for the retroactive payment. Secondly, on the 5th of November, a second letter went from me to the union, reiterating again our commitment and agreement about the topic function book, placement process, and retroactive payment. In a letter dated November the 7th, I make a comprehensive summary of all documents and negotiations that took place between myself as government with the fire department, and I inform them about all what has been discussed in our meetings in the recent past. That took place on the 7th of November. And today on the 12th of November, because I received on the 10th of November a letter again from the WICSU, in which they gave me twice 24 hours to react. I did it. And the letter just left this morning, in which I reiterate and confirm government's agreement to accept the function book, to do the placement process, and actively realize the retroactive payment. Let's go now on the topics, the 3 of them, the function book, the placement process, and the retroactive payment. Let's start with the function book. Before my tenure as Prime Minister, the process was started for a new function book for government. The process, how it goes, is that this function book is in draft. Then you have a draft concept of the function book. This goes to the CCSU, that is the platform of the unions representing the workers, the government, civil servants. In the union that is part of the WICSU, they take that draft function book to the workers through their management, and then they discuss, and it comes back to the WICSU, and from the WICSU it comes back to government. In the discussion of the function book, the negotiation for my tenure already, that we are okay with the draft function book. And because of the green light of the agreement of the function book, we decided to proceed with the function book. In February this year, 2025, after a long process to get this realized, we had again this draft function book that has actually been ratified, and for this reason is then the existing lawful function book for the civil servant, inclusive the fire department, for example. The moment that this function book was published, we got reaction. We already had some information that there were some remarks on the function book, but the moment that I got in government, already that whole process passed the station of CCSU. And the CCSU agreed for the function book. So now we have a function book that is published since February 2025, and that is the function book that we have. After that, the CCSU and the workers decided that they don't want to accept this function book that is a very long process. I agreed to revisit the function book. After I have agreed to revisit the function book, I told them, because there was a placement process that is dependent on the function book. You cannot place somebody if you don't have a valid function book. And also the retroactive payment is also something that is dependent on the function book. So if they want to revisit the recently published function book, that is possible, but it will prolong the process for the placement, what they're waiting on, and especially the retroactive payment. They realized, after I explained them that I agree to revisit the function book, but I attended them on the fact that there will become a delay in the placement and the retroactive payment, they decided that they're going to settle for the function book that was published in February 2025. By doing that, then, we agreed, which was already an agreement, that the function book as such would be revisited in the coming 3 years. So that was already by day one with the new function book that was established in February 2025, was that the function book will be revisited. They wanted a complete revision. I agreed with that. Once I agreed with and attended them, that is going to delay the process of placement and retroactive. They decided they want to accept the current function book under condition that we are going to revisit in the coming 3 years the function book. I agreed with that too. Secondly, I agreed also with the placement process based on the function book of February. I have sent a message on the 24th of October in which I stated. I sent a message on the 5th of November, and today a letter just left. I had to actually react before 5 o'clock this afternoon. I reacted already while I'm walking, coming down. The letter was sent to the union leader, Mrs. Kanhiter. Okay, so we agreed with the function book. We agreed with the placement process. And once you have a placement process, then you have the retroactive payment. I informed them that for the placement project, you have to have a landsbesluit, a national decree, to establish before you do the replacement, you need to have a placement committee in which the committee is going to evaluate all the workers to make sure that they come in the right position with the new function book. It can be also possible that there will be some resistance and objection per worker, and for that you have a landsbesluit also called the objection committee. So it's a very complicated process that you have to have a placement committee and also a objection committee. So coincidentally, Friday, if I'm not mistaken, this morning, Friday last week, I have signed the advice for the landsbesluit, the national decree, to go to the governor for ratification. And this morning, the whole dossier file went to the government. It left my office this morning early to go to the governor for actually ratification of the legal framework to establish a placement committee and an objection committee. Also, there is a third one. Once you're placed, you also have to get now the second step being the retroactive payment. I have agreed also in the letter of the 24th, the 5th, and the one of today again, that we are going to agree with the retroactive payment of the workers. The only thing that they sent me on the 10th of November was the fact that they wanted, because they find that there is no great progression in the negotiation, they wanted a mediator. I agreed in the letter of this morning for us to have also a mediator, because from my side also I realized that we have done everything to accommodate the wishes of the fire department. There is something around of discussion is a commitment letter. The fire department wants a commitment letter. I have sent a letter on the 24th of October on the 5th of November and the 12th of November, in which I commit to all the requests of the fire department. You have, actually, it would be nice for you to read those letters, but it's letters directed to the union. In all these 3 letters, there is a full commitment of government to agree with all proposals, inclusive the mediator that they want now to continue the process of the function book, of the placement process, and also of the retroactive payment. I have here the letter. I just sent it this morning, so this is the proof that the letter has been sent. About the commitment letter, we have to make a few remarks on this. If the Prime Minister of this country uses for his correspondence his letterhead, if he puts his authentic signature on all the documents, if he uses the stamp to actually validate the document, you have the letterhead, you have my signature, and you have your stamp, in which I use the word commit. We agree with the proposals. Now, all of a sudden, the same fire department wants, next to this 3-4 correspondences, they want now a commitment letter. If we start in government with now writing documents to each other in which we commit and agree on their proposals, what has to be done. And after reading those documents from the Prime Minister on his letterhead, with his signature, with his stamp, then you demand a second document that you want a commitment letter on the content of the letter that I sent you on the street. I think we are undermining the trust, the reliability, and also the recognition of how people should communicate with each other in trust. The fact that these letters has been written, signed by me, and stamped shows and proves the reality of this document. So there is, from my side, no reason to sign a other commitment letter for 3 letters that I'm using already to commit and communicate with the fire department to commit. So I end also my letter stating that considering the comprehensive details and commitments provided in my letters of October the 3rd even, October the 24th, November the 5th, and this letter of today, the November the 12th, I hereby reaffirm my stance that this correspondence, on the backdrop of the consistency of previous communications, constitutes a clear and substantive commitment letter for the correspondence and meetings that we had with each other. So this Prime Minister and this government is fully committed to actually accommodate and work on all the demands that has been requested from the fire department. And seeing this, I do not think there is justification for a continuation of a go-slow from the fire department. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister Marcelino, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, November 12, 2025. Thank you for joining us. We now move on to the question and answer session. And Emil Lee of Island Nature Radio, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Elika. Good morning, Prime Minister. I have first 2 clarification questions.
Yeah.
Assuming that these commitments have financial consequences,
Yep.
Wouldn't the commitment require an approval from Council of Ministers and approval from the Finance Department that the funds are available? And so wouldn't it require some sort of a decision from Council of Ministers and therefore also ratified by the governor in order to be a firm commitment versus just a letter on your letterhead?
Yes, of course. And of course, before I can commit with such a demand as retroactive payment, the first person that I have to consult is the Minister of Finance. And after agreement with the Minister of Finance, we decided that we are going to agree with a request of the fire department for the retroactive payment for those that are eligible for the payment. So once you decide, once you are convinced that you deserve or you are ones that must get the retroactive payment, that's no problem. We're going to go through a claim process that is also described in the letter. So first we place you. For the placement, you have the placement committee and the objection committee. You can disagree with them, and then there is objection committee. Once they settle on the placement, the next step is that we're going to make use of the claim process. And with the claim process, we're going to verify the amount, the years that we have to go back to pay the individual workers that deserve and have right to be paid for the retroactive payment.
Okay, again, just for clarity, I'm sorry if I misunderstood. Until there's a decision by the Council of Ministers to approve it, there are still things that could happen that would interfere with paying out, et cetera,
of course,
right?
But we have to understand that. For example,
but that process has not been done yet, the Council of Ministers approval.
No, but the process is, for example, the Landsbesluit left today to the governor. So we have the legal framework ready. That proves already, because this is a whole process to get this going. The fact that I can present it today, the fact that I signed that Friday past, means that this process was on the go already. But ultimately, it's ready. It's going to go this morning. It left, by the way, this morning to the governor to be ratified. And then we will have the legal framework. And then the next step is, once we have the legal framework, we have to now work on establishing the committee. And from there on, the process starts for the placement, and then making use of the claim process for the retroactive payment.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. My second clarification, you mentioned that there was a military ship that was going to Jamaica and that was going to resupply in Barbados to go back to Jamaica. St. Martin is a hub. There's many wholesalers. Why not come to St. Martin and boost the economy and resupply the ship from St. Martin instead of Barbados?
I think logistically, the kingdom at the end of the day has a big saying in the decision making, especially concerning the Navy, and they decided that they wanted to do it via that route. And I accepted that because at this particular moment, those details that you mentioned are important. But I think the suffering of the people of Jamaica is more intense than this discussion. Thus, I give priority to emergency and whatever must happen for the people of Jamaica to get their assistance, their help. I will agree with that. And that happened on the 4th. And the ship is again from Barbados departing to Jamaica for a second batch.
Okay, so my question relates to actually single-use plastic bags. There was legislation that was passed in Parliament, and I understand that the legislative framework was developed by Plastic-Free SXM and has been submitted to the Ministry of General Affairs in December of 2024 and is apparently in the Ministry of AZ for next steps. Can you update us on that?
Yes, that document is still by YZME, it's AZ, of course. And we are now trying to actually accelerate the process to make sure that we get it executed, because I think it's high time for us to have a plastic-free St. Martin.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Emil. Jacqueline Hoffman of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Prime Minister.
Good morning,
Minister of Roaming. My question is to Minister Gams. The November 10 court case you explained sees to that the court found the construction freeze justified. During this court case, you told the judge that you wanted the freeze in place to study, review the way they were excavating and all the work that was done. Because the trees were cut, there were septic tanks and excavation ongoing. Then a few months later, you retroactively gave the civil works permits. The question is, based on what did you decide that because the affected residents, they hired a geoengineering firm, first one that gave the assignment back because they didn't get the information from VROMI. Then they hired another firm from Holland, GeoBest, and they did a lobverzoek through the lawyer and requested all the information that pertains to this excavation, and they didn't get it. So they wrote the GeoBest report without the geoengineering information, all the analysis, that information they don't have. So after this was published by the Daily Herald, Dam Caribbean said they did have an engineering report, so that they had a study done. But that was not shared by VROMI with GeoBest. So based on the LOP request. Is this report there? What have you reviewed? How did you come to the decision? Because what VROMI provided was a sheet that only says that the flamboyant trees that were cut need to be brought to the landfill and the debris needs to be brought to the landfill. But there's nothing about the depth, the width, the distance from the boundaries, etc., from the retaining wall, all of that. So what was the basis for the civil works permit issuance?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jacqueline, for that. So there is a standard procedure with civil works permits that looks at the way in which you use the land. The discussion regarding the boundaries to the regarding the property itself is covered within the building permit. So the two are basically separate. And in the court case, it was established that this civil works permit doesn't deal with the size of the building, where the building actually is. That's been already put aside by the court. What this actually deals with is the manner in which excavation happens, where excavated material goes, and the impact of water flow in the area, if at all impacted by the building. So those are the considerations given for the civil works permit, not necessarily what the building looks like. Why? Because in the court's opinion, and this is something that talked with government continuity, if a building permit is issued, you don't now go through the building permit through a civil works permit. The two normally have to come together. In this case, it didn't, but the court effectively decided already that the discussion is not about should the building exist. That station has passed already, as confirmed by the court. It's really about the digging and the impact of the digging and how it was dug. So the question about the boundary, it wasn't part of this discussion. Secondly, with regards to the report within VROMI, I have to verify what was not given or given, because I don't have the information necessarily directly at hand. We can speak off after the session to give more information when the report itself was handed in or information requested from the ministry, because I don't have that information currently at hand. So if you could, either here or after, up to you, but that information of data when the request was made for the information from VROMI.
Through your lawyer, the government lawyer, there's been several requests.
Okay.
There was an official LOP request
Yes.
Asking for all the technical information, and they didn't get it.
Okay.
So that is in the GeoBest report, says we can update the report once we get the information.
Okay. No, if that's the case, I will look into that to see why that wasn't given, because I wasn't aware that it wasn't given, because all lobverzoeken by law have to be replied to. So I will look into that, and I will, of course, get back to you on that to see where that potential miscommunication may have happened within the ministry.
There is also the issue of the verdict from January 25 that said that before October, there should be a new road for the residents so they can reach their homes. And October has passed and there's no road. So that would pertain also to the civil works permit, right?
Not necessarily, because again, that January 25th judgment of 2024, I believe.
This year.
Of this year, because that was something that was considered before this. That's something that has to be held within the civil matters. But again, I will look into that. But if there's a court judgment, government itself doesn't intervene and take action on court judgments. It'd be up to the person who's taken government to court, who's taken the developer to court, to then now follow up on that judgment having not been fulfilled, not necessarily government, because government themselves didn't have the injunction. It was the private citizen. So private cases, government doesn't intervene on. So
But
if you have,
the road is part of the plan of the building permit.
Mm-hmm.
It is on the plan. It's not there. So Vrome has an inspection, right?
Yes. So, but then again, what I'm trying to say is the minute something goes outside of government to a private civil law, government no longer gets involved. It's really now to follow up on that claim would have to be the private client or the private developer taking a code. But we can always look into it, of course. But of course, once things go to the civil course by a court, government has intervened. I've been asked to intervene on a number of different things. And I think it's very important to recognize that once things go to the private legal system, government has no obligation, or actually they have no right to actually intervene. But of course, I will follow up on these points because, again, the whole point of this is that if you are sort of infringing on the quality of life of somebody else, it also has some elements that we can look into. But of course, I'll look at see what the civil matters say and what role we can play in it as well.
Thank you, Minister Gums. Emil, you have the floor.
Minister, good morning. I think everybody's been complaining about traffic. Clearly, the cruise arrivals have arrived, but the real busy season for the hotels, the land-based guests, hasn't even really started yet. But traffic is horrendous. People say, a pothole, puddles. So for minor infrastructure problems, it ends up creating huge delays. Do you have a plan as Minister of Vrome to sort of tackle those small obstacles that are creating impediments to our traffic flow? Because otherwise this season's going to be painful.
Yep. No, very good question, Emil. And I think it's very important to recognize that there's a low-hanging fruit issues, which are basically, like you indicated, the potholes, the potential flooding. And there's the big, more abstract matters, which is basically the number of cars we have in the island and the way how we've built. If you recall, a couple of months ago, I indicated that I'm actually busy with UNOPS now for a more comprehensive, large-scale study that's going to be done in 3 phases. Phase 1 identifies those quick, low-hanging fruits, which we already started implementing somewhat throughout the country, towards Phase 2. And Phase 2, which basically looks at potential new infrastructure. Within this study, which is going to be kicking off in the next couple of weeks, actually, in terms of the more comprehensive side, we're looking at things like, do we need to create more roads? What do we do with the car situation? Because the reality is, the potholes themselves aren't necessarily causing dramatic amounts of traffic. It's really about the way of our capacity to carry. So the Minister of TS has also initiated, to sort of complement this traffic study, a carrying capacity study. The reality is, there's some hard discussions that have to be had about, one, the way we build. So for example, cars backing up onto the main road versus filter lanes. We're implementing that more and more within the Ministry of Vrome in terms of what we do with civil works permits and building permits. It's also a question of how many cars we allow in a country that has 37 square miles, and the fact that in the considerations we make about traffic, we have to consider also the front side. We have a completely open border, so we can't consider 16 square miles. Infrastructure has to also be in tandem in cooperation with the front side. The low-hanging fruit, yes, we've already started things like, for example, the entrance of Canagita Street with one-way traffic, because that has created for years the bottlenecking in that area. There were months and months of complaints, people failing to realize the work was actually still closed. I haven't had many complaints anymore about that, beyond the fact now that there's a bit of a challenge now entering onto the pond field from the secondary road, but that's where we're going to address in the more long term, because the idea is also to address infrastructure as a whole, because we know, rightfully so, low-hanging fruit, flooding does impact the way people use the road. The minute it rains, people start to slow down. But again, these are things that are very low-hanging, and we are working on them continuously. But I think what's really important, we have to reflect on it, is how much more can we take, and how do we regulate traffic, cars, and the way we build as well, and the impact of that on the infrastructure.
Thank you, Minister Gums. Members of the media, we do have 10 minutes left. Jacqueline, you have the floor.
Question for the Prime Minister. A while back, during a visit from Dutch authorities to the islands, you were at a plantation house and gave an interview there. And then you spoke and you said that immigrant workers on the island are very important for the economy. That everybody...
Where was that, by the way? I didn't...
At a plantation house. That was with Minister of Defense, I think, Dutch Minister of Defense.
Okay.
And Emily and I were there interviewing
Yes.
you and the minister. Schoof, yeah. It was Prime Minister Schoof, yeah.
Ah, okay.
Sorry.
Yes. Now I get it. When the Prime Minister of the Netherlands was here,
Yes.
and we had it by the
Plantation House.
Yes,
Yes.
correct. Yes.
Then you said that immigrant workers on St. Maarten are very important for the economy.
Of course.
And I would want to ask you to explain that further, because when we talk about the rights of workers,
Yeah.
how are you going to guarantee that immigrant workers are paid fairly, that they the conditions in which they work? And just to give two examples, the Fiber to the Home project of Telem, when they were in St. Peter's and St. John's, it was mostly Venezuelans who were working there and digging the trenches. But many of them never got paid. And the contractors didn't even know the names of the people. When you have the court case with Mr. Mingo in the port, during the court case, it became apparent that the management of the port didn't know the names of the workers. So how are you going to guarantee, while the country needs these people, that they are actually treated fairly?
Yes, very, very good question. First of all, immigrants are a great contributor to the society of St. Maarten on all levels, also on the economic level. Not only that they are here living, spending their money that they get, but they contribute in the labor sector also, that's one. But how can you solve the problem? First of all, you have to organize very good your immigration. That is the first thing. It is a very complex something, because we speak about illegals and legals, but we have a very complex border to control. For example, that we have one that we share with the French side. We don't have the full capacity in finance to pay for the logistics necessary to have a good border control for St. Maarten. It demands a high budget to do that. But although the circumstances, we are doing what we can for that. And secondly, there has been in the past also a legalization process by the towers. The question is, are we going to do that once more or not? What you have to be careful for that is, if you continue not organizing in a good way your immigration, even if you legalize everybody, it will come to a point again that you have to re-legalize people, but you want to avoid that one. And thirdly, I do believe that the Ministry of VSI is the one responsible, of course, for labor. And I think we have to organize in a good way that we actually, for those in the labor market, to be legal in the labor market, also to have a contribution to the social fees, for example, SZV contribution, and in that way also contribute to the system necessary to keep it going for the country. So I'm not against illegals, no. People are welcome, but on our side, we have to recognize that we have our challenges, but next to that, it's very complicated, and there is a high budget necessary to guard the border for immigration in a way that it's responsible to give a good organized immigration policy for country St. Maarten. And it's something that recently we discussed also. That was, by the way, another topic that I discussed with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, to see how we can manage with contribution of the kingdom, to see how we can improve the border control for St. Maarten, because a weak border control contributes to this phenomenon that you are talking about. So, and I am against the fact that there is still groups that are being misused, as you said, of workers that are working and not being paid for. That is because it's not well organized. Those on that field of construction, for example, get the opportunity to make maluse of the circumstances. And I disagree with that. But the Minister of VSA is well aware of what is going on at this particular moment, but it's all about organization, organize, and organization.
You suggest there could be another Brooks Tower Accord agreement? Another Brooks Tower agreement like in 2009?
That discussion has been carried in the Council of Ministers. I'm not against it, if that is your question to me. What I'm against is that we're going to do it incidentally while we are not actually organizing it to prevent for us to have to do it again in the future. So there will be a moment that there will be a Brooks Tower again, but if we implement that, the structure and the base and the legal framework has to be there, well organized, with also the controlling function that needs to execute it has to be there. Otherwise, we're going to constantly do damage control with this Brooks Tower, and I think that is not the intention how we have to solve our problems in this country.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Emil, you have the floor.
So a clarification, a follow-up question.
Yes.
I think you would agree that compliance with the laws should be the path of least resistance, right? We want to encourage people to follow the rules. Mm-hmm. The fact is, in St. Martin, you can have an undocumented worker, and actually government encourages them to register and pay their taxes, register at SZV so they have their proper health insurance. Mm-hmm. The structural problem becomes that once they've registered there, if they attempt to become legal, in the work permitting process, they reveal that within the own government system that they're currently on island, and then their application gets rejected. So there's a structural mismatch there. Mm-hmm. And I hope, is that something that you and the Minister of VSA would at least look at how to fix that dilemma?
And that is the challenging framework that I'm talking about. If you don't tackle those issues, you will not be able to get a good overview and hold of this immigration for this island, St. Martin. And secondly, the laws are there, but it's quite complicated. And secondly, to obey to the law, you need those that are going to actually give follow-up to the law too. And that is also a challenge for St. Martin, that we do not have enough people to give follow-up to the law in execution to get good control of what is going on the island, and that is also a challenge that we have to solve. We have a lot of problems, but we will get there one day with this country, believe me.
My last question. You and I have had over the years many, many discussions about healthcare in St. Martin, and in particular general health insurance and the SAHA. Yeah. I understand that the SAHA is making its round through the different advisory boards. So I would like to question and, let's say, challenge the legislation when it comes to Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers needs to approve the legislation to go to Parliament to be debated. Approving for legislation to go to be debated is different than the Council of Ministers approving the draft legislation, giving its opinion that, in the Council of Ministers' opinion, this legislation is good, it's workable, it's responsible. Mm-hmm. Will you, in this Council of Ministers, when the SAHA legislation comes to Council of Ministers, make a decision as to whether you agree with it, not just agree to send it to Parliament, but that you are in agreement with the legislation? Because if it's done wrong, this will be hugely disastrous for this country.
Yes. Mr. Lee, very good question. You said it. We are not the ones approving. The Parliament is going to approve. So that is how the system works. At the end of the day, it's legislation. It's landsverordening. It's national. It's a landsverordening, and that means that the Parliament has to approve it. So it will pass by the COM, but at the end of the day, it's Parliament that approves it.
So just for clarity, the Council of Ministers will not give an opinion on whether they agree with the content.
No, we will have to form a stance in the COM before it goes to Parliament, of course. That phase still has to come.
So you will?
We will discuss it in the COM for sure, and then the outcome of the voting will decide if the COM is in agreement with it or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Emil. Unfortunately, Jacqueline, we are out of time. Therefore, I cannot allow another question, but any further questions can be sent to the Minister's Cabinet in writing. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, November 12, 2025. For rebroadcast, tune into stmartingov.org, St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, Tel TV Plus Channel 15, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, and YouTube channel, Government of St. Martin. For a video on demand, log on to the Government of St. Martin's YouTube channel. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Relaika Roach and wishing you a pleasant day further.